Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that's a lot less cozy than your bedroom right now. A world where your family disappears in a flash, the village looks at you sideways, and there's no one to tuck you in, or even remind you to brush your teeth, as if you even own a toothbrush. It's not a fairy tale, it's a medieval orphan's morning, waking up and realizing, for better or worse, that you're completely, utterly on your own. You're probably curled up somewhere warm, maybe a pillow under your head, or at least you're not sharing your bed with 3 chickens, 2 fleas, and a suspicious puddle. The room is dark except for the faint glow from your phone, and you're here to relax, drift off, and let the worries of the modern world fade away. But before you get too comfortable, a reality check. If you were a medieval orphan, you probably wouldn't survive the week, no offence. The odds are stacked against you, and the story we're about to slip into is one you're lucky to only hear about, not live. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps me out and lets me know you're part of our little late night history crew. Go ahead and let me know your location and what time it is as you're listening tonight. Are you in a big city, a tiny village, or somewhere in between? I love seeing where everyone tunes in from, especially when you're all ready to leave reality behind and drift off into the past. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up. You're maybe 6, maybe 10. Nobody kept track, and there's no one left to remind you when your birthday is. The hut around you is cold and dim, its thatch roof leaking somewhere overhead, letting in a soft patter of rain. You stretch, and for a split second you expect to hear your mother fussing with the fire, or your father muttering about the pigs, but the silence is so deep it almost hums. Your heart sinks. This is the new normal. They're gone. Maybe it was fever, maybe famine, or maybe that weird accident with the neighbour's cart. Historians still argue whether village plagues or wars took more parents, but the result for you is the same. You sit up, blanket thin as an onion skin, stomach already rumbling. In this world, hunger wakes up before you do, and it's not shy about reminding you all day long. Once you'd shuffle to the hearth and someone would hand you a crust of bread or a watery bowl of pottage. Now, if you want breakfast, you're going to have to find it yourself. You shuffle to the door, maybe it's barely hanging on its hinges, maybe you've already learned to sleep with one eye open because an unlocked door in a medieval village is a dinner invitation for the local stray dog or that old woman who always smells like onions and trouble. You peer outside. The village is already alive, smoke curling from a few chimneys, chickens fussing, dogs sniffing out last night's leftovers. Nobody waves. Nobody calls your name. If anything, the baker's wife tightens her grip on her own children, shooting you a look that says, "Don't even think about coming near my bread." There's a story in every village, and for orphans the story is usually short and sad. They won't last the winter, you hear, whispered from behind fences and under breath. It's almost a game to the adults. Will the orphan beg, steal, or vanish first? Quirky side note, in some medieval towns they'd hang a little bell on an orphan's neck, like a stray sheep, just so people could keep an eye on their bad luck. It's a fact lost in most textbooks, but pops up in old parish records, and makes you feel less like a child and more like livestock. Your senses go into overdrive. Every smell, the sweet rot of compost, the sharp tang of pig manure, hits you twice as hard because you're always sniffing for food. If you're lucky, you might scavenge a bit of yesterday's porridge from the pot in the ashes, scraping the sides like a mouse. If not, there's always the hope of an apple core someone tossed behind the tavern. Historians still argue whether villages had any real system for caring for their orphans. Some say the church stepped in right away, sweeping lonely children into monasteries or nunneries where, at least you'd get soup and shelter, and a very early introduction to chanting at sunrise. Others believe orphans mostly slipped between the cracks, left to fend for themselves, or, if they were unlucky, snapped up by someone looking for cheap labour. Your morning routine is now a test of nerves and negotiation. You might try your luck at the manor house, offering to weed the garden for a heel of bread. The lady of the house might smile, if she's having a good day, or she might send you running, broom swinging, warning you not to scare her chickens. There's no way to predict which version of kindness you'll get. On a really desperate morning, you might even consider stealing a few berries, a crust. You know the risk. Medieval punishment wasn't exactly a slap on the wrist. Stocks, whippings, or worse, all waited for those caught misbehaving. You start learning the faces you can trust, or at least the faces that don't actively wish you harm. The old shepherd is sometimes kind, letting you warm your hands over his fire or toss a crust your way. The blacksmith, though, has a heart as soft as his hammer, and you steer clear. There's an art to being invisible, to blending in with the background. You start to move quietly, speak only when spoken to, and keep your eyes low. A mainstream historical fact: in many medieval towns, orphans were often pressed into labour before the age of 7, if they survived that long. Childhood, as you know it, is a luxury that evaporates overnight. If you're looking for playdates or sleepovers, well, good luck. Medieval orphan playdates are usually just groups of kids picking weeds together, or trying to outdo each other in who can eat the weirdest thing and survive. Spoiler, don't try the mushrooms behind the stable. Maybe you find a friend, a scrappy girl who lost her parents last winter, or a boy who swears he saw his father's ghost near the mill pond. Kids band together, partly for safety, and partly because misery loves company. The Orphans Club is real, even if it's just a mutual agreement to watch each other's backs while everyone else looks away. By midday, you're already exhausted. Every moment is survival. Dodging angry geese, sneaking into the church for a nap on the back pew, hoping nobody chases you out. Once, you might have dreamed about growing up to be a knight or a baker. Now, you dream about a real meal and a place to sleep where you don't have to worry about who or what might bite you during the night. Your clothes are thin, patched so many times they're more whole than fabric. Your shoes, if you have any, are a joke, and not a good one. Most days you just go barefoot, learning to dodge sharp stones, thistles, and the occasional gift left behind by the local livestock. On cold mornings you try to keep moving, rubbing your hands together and wishing for summer, or at least for someone else's shoes. Historians still argue whether orphaned children in medieval villages were ever adopted, or if the idea of adoption is just a modern projection onto the past. Some accounts say generous villagers would take in a child or two, giving them a place at the table, usually the cold, wobbly end. Others claim orphans were more often left to become wanderers, drifting from village to village, growing up wild and wary. As the day drags on, your hunger gnaws louder, and your hopes get quieter. You watch families gather for their midday meal, listen to the laughter drifting from open windows. You remind yourself not to look too long or too hungry. People notice when you do. And if you're too obvious, too desperate, sometimes you're accused of cursing the house with your bad luck. Quirky, medieval logic at its finest. Let's take a moment to appreciate your resourcefulness. Nobody tells you how to survive. You just figure it out. You learn which kitchens leave their scraps out, which fields the crows avoid, for good reason, usually. You get good at making deals, good at running away, and just sometimes good at hiding. Your story, as a medieval orphan, is not about finding magic or happy endings. It's about waking up, facing the silence, and learning every single morning that you're going to have to save yourself, because nobody else is coming. The rooster crows before the sun rises, but you're already awake, nerves strung tight as the village cat's whiskers. Being a medieval orphan isn't just about missing bedtime hugs or lullabies. Every single day is an exhausting obstacle course, and you run it with the kind of focus that would put Olympic athletes to shame. There's no room for sleeping in, no cozy breakfast waiting, and absolutely no one making sure you're ready for the day. If you want to survive, you learn to wake before the baker, move before the farmers, and grab whatever scraps of fortune the day might offer. You trudge out into the grey dawn, shoes still missing, again not a joke, just your everyday reality, toes curling in the mud. The village is coming to life, but not for you. The men gather in the square, stretching and yawning, scratching at beards. Women sling heavy baskets onto their hips, eyes already darting around for trouble or gossip. You, orphan, are invisible, until you're not. Until someone needs a messenger, a runner, or just a child to shoo the chickens out of the churchyard. You hear it everywhere. The low cluck of hens, the shouts from the market, the slap of laundry on stones. These aren't comforting sounds, not anymore. Each noise is a warning or an invitation, and you have to read the difference quick. Historians still argue whether orphaned children were more likely to be taken in as helpers by villagers or left to their own devices entirely. In some places, you'd be lucky to land a job chasing crows from the wheat fields. In others, you're just part of the scenery, something people step around like a pothole. Today your stomach leads the way. Hunger has a way of drowning out fear, shame, and even common sense. You make a beeline for the baker's shop where you know the best smells always come with the worst odds. The baker's wife, round as a barrel and twice as stern, catches your eye through the fogged-up window. She lifts her chin. Not today, her look says, but you linger anyway, just out of reach, hoping for a dropped crust or a moment of sympathy. Occasionally she'll throw out a burnt end or a stale roll. If she's in a good mood, if not, she lets the dog out. Medieval dogs, by the way, are not fluffy Labradors, more like small wolves with a taste for unwashed feet. You haven't run so fast since last week's potato incident, which, in your defence, was only half your fault. Who leaves a whole sack of potatoes unattended anyway? That's practically an invitation. When luck runs dry at the bakery, you drift to the church, your backup breakfast spot. The nuns are already sweeping the steps, muttering about wayward souls and the devil's business. You try to look as pious as possible, hands folded, eyes big and innocent. If you're lucky, Sister Agnes might slip you a heel of bread or a spoonful of last night's porridge, mostly crust, but beggars can't be choosers. The church is supposed to care for the needy, but resources are thin and patience thinner. Sometimes the nuns press you into service, scrubbing floors or fetching water. You do it, not for charity, but for calories. In some parishes, orphans were expected to sing for their supper, literally. Nothing like a tone-deaf rendition of Ave Maria in exchange for a bowl of bean soup. If you're lucky, the congregation only laughs a little. As you drift through the day, you get good at reading the weather, not just the clouds, but the mood of the whole village. If the blacksmith's fire is burning bright and he's singing, you might risk asking for a scrap of meat. If the midwife's shutters are closed, you know to stay away. Someone's sick, and the last thing you need is to be blamed for bad luck. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed orphans were unlucky, or if that's just a story grown tall over the centuries. Either way, you keep your head down. You become an expert at blending in, always at the edge of the crowd. You find work where you can, carrying buckets, sweeping stables, running errands no one else wants. Payment is usually a few coins, if you're lucky, or a crust of bread. On feast days there's hope. Villagers sometimes toss scraps to the poor after the big meal. On normal days, though, you rely on cunning, charm, and the occasional bold lie. Of course my master said you'd pay me for this. By midday, you've run errands for 3 families and only gotten yelled at by 2. Not bad, by your standards. You pause by the well, cupping your hands for a drink. The water is cold, clear, and the closest thing to a treat you'll get all day. As you gulp it down, you watch the other children. Most of them ignore you. Some stare. One boy, about your age, sticks out his tongue and calls you rat child. You shrug it off. Sticks and stones, right? But inside it stings. If you had a coin for every time someone called you a rat, you'd have maybe enough for a really tiny rat. Your chores don't end with the sun. As the light fades, villagers want things done before dark. Fires tended, animals herded, water carried in. You hustle because you have to, not because you hope for thanks. The grown-ups are tired, cranky, and quick to snap. You dodge more than one thrown shoe, avoid the baker's dog, again, and keep an eye out for the old herbalist who sometimes has a sweet root or dried apple for you, if she's feeling generous. One more historical fact. Children as young as 5 or 6 were expected to work hard, especially orphans. Childhood was a short, sometimes brutal chapter, and there was little time for games. Still, you find ways to make it bearable. Maybe you and another orphan invent a secret code, or dare each other to sneak a look at the Lord's garden. Simple joys, fleeting but real. By nightfall, you're running on fumes. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. You curl up wherever you can, a stable loft, the shadowed corner of the church, maybe even under a market stall if you're feeling bold. Sometimes, a kind villager lets you sleep by their hearth, usually for a price. You close your eyes, muscles tense even in sleep, dreaming of roast chicken and warm blankets. You figure you've tried every sleeping spot in the village except the Lord's featherbed, but that's mostly because the guard dogs are even meaner than the bakers. Historians still argue whether the daily grind of medieval orphans ever got easier, or if each year just made you tougher, sadder, and more invisible. All you know is that you survived another day, and in your world that counts as a win. The bells begin to chime, slow and heavy, and your shoulders tense instinctively. You've learned their meanings the hard way. 1 bell means morning prayer, 2 might signal a funeral, and 3 usually means a noble's child has sneezed, and the priest is being summoned just in case it's the plague. For you, the bells rarely mean anything good. This morning they toll lazily from the chapel tower, summoning the devout and the desperate. You shuffle toward the church courtyard, the sky still grey and your stomach already hollow. The nuns are gathering in their dark habits, like a cluster of ink stains blotting out the light. One of them, Sister Matilda, sharp as vinegar, glares at you as you draw near. You bow your head. You've learned that trick. Look smaller, quieter, hungrier. It sometimes softens their scorn. The church is supposed to be the one safe place for the orphaned, and in theory it is, but charity in the Middle Ages comes with strings, rules and rituals. You're ushered through the side door with the other beggar children, and the smell hits you immediately. Stale incense, damp stone, and the faintest whiff of mildew. You're herded into the side chapel, where a pot of thin soup bubbles over a low fire. The scent should be comforting, but it's not. You've tasted this soup before. It's more water than anything, and the flavour comes mostly from boiled onion skins and whatever was scraped from yesterday's plates. You grab a wooden bowl, your fingers numb and calloused, and wait in the slow-moving line. There's no talking, just the quiet shuffle of feet and the occasional cough that makes everyone tense. Germs are practically currency in this place. Quirky fact: some monastic hospitals in the medieval period would mix wine with herbs to disinfect wounds and serve it alongside meals to keep the blood warm. Too bad your bowl today contains neither wine nor warmth. A monk ladles soup into your bowl, avoiding your eyes. You mutter a thanks. He doesn't reply. The church feeds your body, sure, but it's also here to shape your soul, and that means rules. Lots of rules. Eat only when told, sit still, pray on command, and for heaven's sake don't make eye contact with the priest unless you want a lecture about your eternal soul. And probably another round of chores. You sit against the cold wall, slurping the soup as quietly as possible. It's barely enough to satisfy, but it keeps your stomach from clawing at itself for another hour or two. You glance around. Other children sit beside you, hollow-eyed and thin. You recognise some faces. Marjorie, who stopped speaking after her parents died. Tom, who once tried to steal a candle and got slapped so hard he limps now. These are your people, or what passes for them. Historians still argue whether the church's aid to orphans was more about salvation or social control. Were you being fed out of mercy, or were you just being moulded into a properly submissive member of society? Either way, you eat, you obey, you endure. Once the bowls are emptied and stacked, it's time for prayers. You kneel on the cold stone floor, the chill seeping into your bones. The Latin words drone on, half sung, half mumbled, and you don't understand most of them. But you know when to bow, when to cross yourself, when to whisper, Amen. It's muscle memory now. You try not to fall asleep. One boy did last week. and Sister Agnes clipped his ear so hard he couldn't hear properly for a day. Your neck aches, your knees throb, and all the while your thoughts drift to other things. How to find bread later, whether the clouds overhead mean rain, whether the innkeeper's daughter might sneak you a crust again. After prayers you're invited to help with chores, though invited is a generous word, more like drafted. You scrub the floors, carry wood, tend the herb garden. You try not to make a sound. There's a strange peace in the work. It's repetitive, predictable. No one yells if you keep your head down. Besides, there's always the hope that if you work hard enough, they might let you sleep in the sacristy tonight. Warmth and shelter, even if it smells like old books and sour wine. Still, the church is not a home. You know it. Everyone knows it. The monks and nuns may feed you, may teach you a prayer or two, but their kindness ends at the threshold. You're not one of them. You're a mouth to feed, a soul to save, nothing more, and then there are the rules. So many rules. You're not allowed to speak during meals. You must wash your hands in blessed water before entering the chapel. You can't leave the courtyard without permission. You can't look at the relics. You can't laugh. You can't run. You definitely can't climb the bell tower again. Not after what happened last time. Joke time! Remember when you mistook the bishop's fancy hat for a very serious chicken? You still hear about that from the other kids. Behold, the sacred rooster, they whisper, giggling. Not your finest moment. Every moment under the church's roof is like walking a tightrope made of nettles. You're grateful for the food. You hate the silence. You long for the warmth. You dread the sermons. The nuns sometimes speak kindly. Sometimes. They talk about divine love, about mercy, about patience. But they also look right through you, as if you're just a shadow on the wall. And then there are the punishments. Not always cruel, but never gentle. A missed prayer earns you extra chores. A broken rule gets you no supper. Disrespect earns the switch. Quirky side note. Some abbeys had penance wheels, where children would be strapped and spun while being read sermons. You haven't seen one yet, but the threat is enough to make you behave. In the evenings, if you're still hanging around the chapel steps, they'll tell you to leave. The monks lock the doors, the warmth stays inside, you're back on the street like a ghost no one remembers. You don't blame them, not really. They have rules, they have quotas, they can't feed everyone. That's what you tell yourself to make the cold feel less personal. Some nights you try to pray, not because you're devout, but because it feels like the only thing left. You whisper words you barely understand, hoping someone or something is listening. Maybe your mother is, maybe your father is, maybe they're the wind in the trees, the glow of the moon, the whisper behind the organ's song. Historians still argue whether orphans in religious care found any comfort in faith, or if it was simply another system to obey. Some letters survive, written in shaky Latin by young boys learning scripture, asking for forgiveness, or just for a warm meal. You can't write, but if you could, maybe you'd do the same. The stars come out, clear and sharp above the steeple. The village is quiet now, except for the occasional bark or creak of timber. You lie curled in your usual spot beside the chapel wall, your breath fogging the air. You press your back against the stone, still warm from the day, and pull your thin cloak tight around your shoulders. You consider applying to be a monk, lifelong roof, regular meals, free books. But then you remember the singing, all that early morning chanting, hard pass. You fall asleep to the sound of distant bells, a faint breeze rustling the nearby oaks, and your own thoughts wandering places you don't dare speak aloud. Maybe you'll go somewhere else tomorrow. Maybe a nearby village will treat you better. Maybe the rumours are true, that there's a monastery in the mountains that welcomes all children, feeds them honey and bread, and lets them sleep in real beds. Maybe. The morning sun barely peeks over the thatched roofs when you crack open your eyes, not because you're ready to rise, but because you never really slept. That patch of dirt behind the chapel didn't get any softer overnight. The dew soaked through your threadbare cloak hours ago, and your shoulder still throbs from pressing against the stone wall. You stretch carefully, wincing as joints pop and muscles complain. Resting doesn't feel much different from being awake. except you don't have to dodge horses, insults, or thrown turnips when you're horizontal. Today feels colder. Not in temperature necessarily, but in spirit. You're bone-tired, your feet blistered, and the hollow ache in your belly is no longer sharp. It's dull and heavy, like a weight you just carry now. You consider your options, limited as always. The church already turned you away last night. The market square is crawling with guards this morning. Bad news if you're even thinking of slipping a loaf of bread under your cloak. You'll need to find a new place to rest tonight, which means one thing: barns. You trudge through back lanes and muddy trails, heading for the edge of the village where the barns and livestock sheds huddle together like drunkards after a feast. You've learned that animals don't mind company, so long as you don't bother them. A warm flank here, a patch of hay there. It beats sleeping on frost-bitten ground. The trick is getting in without waking the farmer's dog, or the farmer himself, who's usually even grumpier. You spot your target, a small goat shed, partially collapsed but still offering enough shelter to take the edge off the wind. You wait until no one's looking, then slip through the loose slats in the sidewall, careful not to trip on old tools or the goat droppings that litter the floor like tiny landmines. Inside it's dark, quiet, and smells like wet fur and straw. Home, sweet home. You burrow into the hay, brushing away bugs and twitching when something skitters across your arm. Rats, probably. But rats don't yell or slap or lecture you about original sin, so you let them be. Quirky fact: in some parts of medieval Europe, it was considered lucky if a rat ran across your feet, unless, of course, it meant your shoes were full of holes. As you settle into the straw, trying not to itch too loudly, your ears pick up a familiar sound. Hooves. A cow is being led into the next stall. Perfect. Cows give off heat like little sun gods, and if you position yourself just right, you might stay warm for a few hours. You lie there, soaking in the animal's body heat, trying to keep your breathing quiet. Your fingers twitch from cold and habit, counting imaginary coins you'll never own. Historians still argue whether medieval orphans found safety among animals out of necessity or preference. One theory suggests many grew closer to livestock than people. Less judgment, more warmth. You can relate. A goat never calls you filthy street brat. A pig never prays for your soul in the same breath it refuses to feed you. You drift in and out of half-sleep, dreams jagged and quick. You're in a castle with the roast chickens falling from the ceiling, then suddenly you're barefoot in the snow, chased by a man with a bishop's hat and a ladle. You wake with a start, heart thudding. It's late afternoon, judging by the slant of light cutting through the slats. Time to move. Farmers don't take kindly to finding uninvited children curled up in their feed supply. You sneak out, brushing straw from your tunic. It doesn't help. You're already coated in dust, hay, and a few unmentionables. And the smell? A pungent blend of goat, mildew, and yesterday's fear. A true medieval cologne. The village green is alive again, people bustling about, but none of them see you. You are once again a ghost with a beating heart. Your stomach growls. It's more raw than whimper. You consider raiding the compost heap behind the tavern. Gross, yes, but sometimes you find a half-eaten crust or fruit someone tossed in a drunken haze. You check the alley. Clear. You dart to the pile, dig quickly, and yes, a bruised apple, mostly intact. Score. You wipe it on your sleeve, take a bite, and nearly cry from the sour joy. It's the best thing you've tasted all week. As you eat, a noise breaks your moment of peace. A voice. Hey, you! What are you doing? It's the tavern boy, maybe 13, wielding a broom like a sword. You bolt. Not because he'll hurt you, he probably won't, but because if he calls an adult, it's a whole different story. You run, weaving through stalls, dodging carts, heart-pounding. If running from broom-wielding teenagers was an Olympic sport, you'd have taken gold, silver, and probably a few copper coins for style. You end up near the mill pond, breath ragged, apple forgotten. You crouch behind a bush, waiting for your pulse to slow. The water ripples, green and murky. You stare into it, hoping to see something. Anything. Your reflection stares back, gaunt and smudged. You look older than you should, older than you feel. Historians still argue whether orphan children's growth was stunted more from malnutrition or trauma. You feel both in your bones. Your legs ache, your head hurts, but you're alive. That's something. You wander down the old path by the pond, following instinct more than thought. There's an abandoned hut here, half swallowed by vines. Some say it's haunted. Others say an old midwife used to live there, and her ghost still tends to lost children. You laugh, quietly, bitterly. If she's here, she's got lousy hospitality. You push open the door, it creaks like something in a bedtime story right before the monster arrives. Inside it's dark and musty, cobwebs everywhere. A nest in the corner, possibly bird, possibly something more. Toothy. Still it's dry. And no one's chasing you out. You sit. Just sit. Your legs dangle off a broken bench. You stare at the rotting wood, the empty hearth, the bits of moss poking through the cracks. It could almost be a home if you squint, if you dream hard enough. You imagine a fire, bread baking, a soft voice humming. You imagine belonging somewhere. There are actual medieval legends of forest spirits adopting orphan children, teaching them to live off the land and speak with animals. You'd sign up for that in a heartbeat. Night comes fast in the countryside, shadows stretching like fingers across the fields. You stay put. The abandoned hut feels safer than the open roads or the chapel steps tonight. You curl up in the corner, using your cloak as a pillow. You listen to the creaks and groans of the building settling, the chirp of crickets outside, and the wind whispering through the cracks. You think about other orphans you've met. Some disappeared. Some got taken in by distant relatives and vanished from view. Some turned up dead by the river. You think about them more than you'd like. You wonder if anyone thinks about you. Historians still argue whether orphaned children left any legacy, any memory, or if they were simply erased by time, nameless, faceless, forgotten. You want to believe that someone, somewhere, remembers. If ghosts are real, the countryside is packed. So many restless kids floating around, all whispering, "Can you believe I died for stealing a turnip?" You close your eyes, hand tucked under your chin, knees pulled tight to your chest. Tomorrow will be more of the same, dodging boots, chasing food, pretending you're invisible. But for now, you're still. The wind hums, the stars blink awake. You survived another day. You wake to the sound of something breathing nearby. Slow, low, and suspiciously large. You freeze, body stiff as a plank, not daring to move. Is it a dog? A cow? A bear? Your imagination races through every possible scenario until a sleepy bleat tells you it's just a goat. Still, your heart thunders. In your world, every unknown sound could mean danger, or dinner. The sun's just beginning to lighten the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined hut. You stretch cautiously, brushing off a few spiders who've made a home in your cloak overnight. There's no time to waste. The early hours are the best for scavenging before the streets fill with hawkers, scolds and guards who view orphans the way most people view mud on their boots. You trudge back toward the village, your feet already sore and your stomach growling in protest. Maybe the baker tossed out scraps. Maybe the innkeeper's drunk again and left the back door open. Or maybe, if you're lucky, the market will bring opportunity. Food, distraction, pockets. Now, pickpocketing isn't exactly your first choice. It's dangerous, sure, and you're not that good at it yet. Your fingers are still clumsy, your timing off. But when the only other option is hunger gnawing at your ribs like a wild dog, desperation wins out. You blend into the crowd, crouched low and eyes sharp. You've learned who to target. The merchants with heavy purses, the distracted housewives, the travelling monks whose robes practically scream, "I'm too holy to notice." You keep your hands in your sleeves waiting for the moment. You don't want to take much, just a crust of bread, a shiny coin, a half-rotten apple. But today, fate is not on your side. You reach for a dangling pouch just as the merchant turns. His hand clamps down on your wrist faster than you thought possible. "Thief!" he bellows, voice booming through the square like a thunderclap. Time freezes, then it explodes. Hands grab you, twisting your arms, shoving you to the ground. The crowd gathers, a living wall of curious faces and gleeful whispers. You're shoved forward toward the centre of the square, heart pounding so hard you can barely hear the insults. Should cut the hand off, someone mutters. Bet it's not the first time, another adds. You're 8, maybe 9. You weigh less than a sack of flour, but right now, everyone looks at you like you're a hardened criminal. A constable arrives. Fat, red-faced, and already annoyed at having to deal with another urchin problem. He jabs his cudgel at you, barks questions you can't answer fast enough. You stammer, eyes wide, trying to explain that you were hungry, that it was just a scrap, that you didn't mean any harm. Historians still argue whether public punishments for orphan thieves were designed more to correct behaviour or simply to entertain the masses. Either way, it works. You're terrified. Eventually the constable relents. It's not your first time caught, but it's not your worst offence either. You're shoved into the stocks for a few hours, a light punishment by medieval standards. But even that feels like an eternity. The wooden frame clamps around your neck and wrists, rough and splintered. People laugh. Kids throw pebbles. Someone smears something sticky across your forehead. It's humiliation, plain and simple. In some villages, it was customary to hang signs around the necks of petty criminals listing their crimes in rhyme. Yours might read, "This child pinched an apple core. Now he's shamed forevermore." By the time they let you out, your arms are numb and your dignity is shredded. You walk away as fast as you can without crying. Not because you're not hurt, but because showing weakness makes you a bigger target. You've learnt that much. You retreat to the woods for a while, letting the cool air soothe your burning skin. You sit on a rock, listening to the birds, watching ants march in a perfect little line. You wonder if the ants have orphans too. Probably not. Ants always seem to know what to do. Eventually hunger pulls you back towards civilization. You pass the alehouse, where raucous laughter spills from open windows. You peer through the slats, jugs clinking, music playing, meat roasting. Your stomach twists. Inside they feast. Outside you fade. You keep walking until you reach the edge of the village where the poorer families live, those with drafty roofs and crooked fences. You knock softly on one door, hoping for kindness. A woman answers, eyes sunken, hair wild. She takes one look at you and sighs. "Back again?" she mutters. You nod. She doesn't smile, but she doesn't slam the door either. She hands you a crust of bread, dry and hard enough to chip a tooth, but you bow gratefully and back away. You eat it slowly, savouring every bite. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers saw orphan children as burdens or tests of their own morality. You're not sure. Sometimes you think people give you food just so they can feel better about themselves. Other times, it feels like pity. Rarely does it feel like love. You wander until the sun begins to dip behind the hills. Tonight, you know you'll have to find shelter again. Barn, ruins, even the church porch if no one catches you. You pass the village well and see 2 boys sitting on the edge laughing. One of them waves. It's Will, another orphan. His teeth are crooked, his tunic worse than yours, but he grins like he owns the world. You join him, grateful for company that doesn't come with sermons or side eyes. He tosses you a piece of dried meat. "Stole it," he says proudly. You nod and take a bite. Together you trade stories about who got caught doing what, which baker's wife has the softest heart, which guards look the other way. There's laughter, real, honest laughter. Will claims he once tried to pickpocket the bishop. Didn't realise robes didn't have pockets, he grins. Just yank the whole sleeve off. You laugh so hard you choke on your meat. You talk until the stars appear, blinking slowly to life above the village roofs. Then Will nods toward the tree line. "Found a new place," he whispers. "Dry, warm. Kinda smells like cabbage, but better than rats." You follow. The hideout is brilliant. In a way only a desperate child can appreciate. An old root cellar behind a collapsed house, hidden by weeds and forgotten by adults. You crawl inside and instantly feel warmer. There's even a bit of old wool blanket someone must have tossed away. You lie beside Will, sharing the space, not quite friends, not quite strangers. Just two survivors, bound by hunger and hope. Historians still argue whether orphan bonds in medieval times formed lasting kinships, or were just brief alliances of necessity. But here now, in this cabbage-scented cave, it feels like something close to family. As you drift off, you imagine a life where you don't have to run, where your stomach is full, your hands clean, your future something more than just the next day. Maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will be different. You wake up warm. That in itself feels like a miracle. Your cheek is pressed against rough wool, your legs tangled with Will's, and for a few seconds you forget where you are. You could almost be back in your parents' house, wrapped in a real blanket, safe. But then your nose catches that sharp cabbage stink and the illusion crumbles. You sit up slowly. Will's still asleep, mouth slightly open, one arm tucked behind his head like a prince in a barn. You smile a little. You can't remember the last time you smiled in the morning. Outside, dawn is breaking. A sliver of golden light slices through the weeds at the entrance of your makeshift hideout. You stretch your sore limbs and step outside, careful not to disturb Will. The world is quiet, too early for carts, for shouting bakers, for the clatter of barrels rolling over cobblestone. Just birdsong and the distant babble of the stream. It's one of those rare moments when being invisible feels peaceful instead of painful. You take the opportunity to do your usual rounds, scavenging. You head toward the market before it gets busy, scanning for anything useful. A bruised apple here, a heel of cheese there, maybe a fish bone with a scrap of meat still clinging to it. You've become an expert at spotting food the way a falcon spots mice. Your fingers move fast, your eyes faster. Today you find half a meat pie sitting on the tavern windowsill, still warm, abandoned, forgotten. Who cares? You snatch it and bolt. Back at the cellar, Will is sitting up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He sees the pie and grins wide enough to split his face. "You're a godsend," he says. You split the pie unevenly. Will gets the bigger piece. He shared his blanket, after all. As you eat, the two of you talk. Or more accurately, you listen. Will has endless stories. Some are definitely made up. He once claimed to have chased off a wild boar with a spoon. Others seem more likely. He talks about his older brother, lost in the war, and his little sister, who got taken by a noblewoman to be a servant. You tell him about your parents, not the real stories, but the versions you've invented to make them sound like heroes. A mother who healed the sick with herbs, a father who rode horses like a knight. It feels good to talk like this, to pretend you had a past worth remembering. Midday approaches, and you both know it's time to earn your keep. Will heads toward the docks. Fishermen sometimes pay a few coins to kids willing to clean nets or gut fish. You opt for the edge of the village, where the washerwomen gather. They don't like you much, but you've carried enough buckets for them before that you're tolerated. You haul water until your arms ache, your back creaks, and your fingers go numb. But at the end of it, you're handed a chunk of bread and, shockingly, a copper coin. You don't remember the last time someone paid you without being asked. Historians still argue whether orphan labour in medieval times was a kindness, teaching children skills and giving them purpose, or just another form of quiet exploitation. All you know is that your hands are blistered, your legs are shaking, and your belly is slightly less empty than it was. You walk back toward the cellar, but something strange catches your attention. A crowd is forming near the town square. Curiosity pulls you closer. At the centre stands a man on a crate, shouting. He's dressed in bright clothes, a feather in his hat, and beside him is a painted sign. Travelling merchant seeking apprentices. Boys of good character. Your heart races. Could this be it? A way out? You inch closer, trying to make yourself look taller, stronger, less filthy. The merchant scans the crowd, eyes flicking over you, then past you, then back again. "You there," he says. "Come forward." You step out, legs wobbling. "What's your name?" You lie, instinctively. You say something noble-sounding like Edmund or Richard. Something that doesn't sound like the truth. He nods. "You got a family?" You hesitate. Gone, you mutter. He frowns. Any skills? Fast runner, you offer, good with knives. Immediately you regret the last part, it sounds more thief than helper, but he just laughs. Go wait by the cart, he says, pointing. You walk on air. The cart is painted red and gold, with crates tied down and a strange sweet smell in the air. Spices, maybe. You're not sure. You don't care. You sit beside a boy already waiting, older, cleaner, clearly nervous. Will finds you a few minutes later. He's out of breath, panting. What are you doing? Leaving, you whisper. His face falls. With them? You nod. He crouches beside you. They'll work you to death, you know. You're just a tool to them. Maybe, you say, but at least I'll have a bed. Will says nothing. He stares at the cart, then at you. Then he hands you his knife, the only thing he owns that's even close to valuable. Just in case, he mutters. You're speechless. You hug him. It's awkward, fast but real, the kind that sticks. The merchant returns with papers, signatures, instructions. You don't understand most of it. By sundown you're on the road, bouncing in the back of the cart. You glance back at the village, at Will, shrinking in the distance, waving once before disappearing behind a row of trees. Historians still argue whether these apprenticeships were genuine opportunities or cleverly disguised servitude. You're about to find out firsthand. The merchant is strict. He barks orders from the driver's bench, expects silence during meals, and lectures constantly. You sleep under the cart at night, curled between crates. Your bed is a sack of flour that leaks into your ear every time you shift. But you're not cold, and you're not alone. The other apprentice, Thomas, is 2 years older and has already learned the rules. Don't eat the cargo, he warns. Don't talk unless asked. Don't touch the crossbow. You nod dutifully. Days blur into one another. Villagers come and go. You lift crates, sweep stalls, memorize spices and weights. You learn how to haggle, how to clean boots without getting yelled at, and how to cook something halfway edible with only salt oats and rainwater. Travelling merchants sometimes carried strange cure-alls made from honey, chalk and ground-up beetles. You accidentally drink some once thinking it was wine. You throw up for 2 days straight. Still, the journey has its moments. At night under the stars, the merchant softens slightly. He tells stories of cities beyond the sea, of beasts with golden fur, of markets so big they stretch for miles. You soak it in, heart swelling. Maybe you'll see them one day. But apprenticeship is no fairy tale. You're worked to the bone, fed just enough to keep moving and scolded constantly. When you make a mistake, the punishment is swift. Extra chores, no dinner, sometimes a sharp cuff to the head. You miss Will. You miss the freedom of being poor but unsupervised. You miss the laughter, the shared blanket, the root cellar that smelled like cabbage and hope. Still you carry on, because now there's structure, a path, a goal. You've stopped being that orphan. Now you're the merchant's boy. It's a start. As you fall asleep one night, listening to the merchant snore and the wheels creak in the wind, you think about everything you've survived. The barns, the beatings, the begging, the constant ache in your belly and your heart. You pull Will's knife from your pouch and grip it tight. No matter what comes next, you'll be ready. The cart jostles over another pothole, nearly sending you tumbling into a crate of dried figs. You catch yourself just in time, biting back a groan. Your arms ache, your legs are stiff, and your back feels like it's aged 40 years in 4 weeks. But you don't complain. You've learned not to. The merchant, Master Reynold, isn't the cruelest man you've ever met, but he's no saint either. His expectations are carved in stone, and his patience is thinner than the soup you used to beg from the nuns. The road winds onward, bordered by hedgerows and wildflowers, but you barely notice anymore. Each day begins with loading crates, feeding the mule, boiling oats over a smoky fire, and enduring Reynold's constant stream of grumbling. Not like that, boy. Do I look like a nursemaid? If you drop that jar, you're paying with your fingers. Still, there's something manageable about it all. Predictable. For the first time in your short, scattered life, you have a routine, and oddly, that comforts you. You wake up knowing what comes next. You eat at the same time each day, even if it's meagre. You sleep in the same spot under the cart, and you've grown used to the rickety sound of the wheels and the constant smell of pickled fish leaking from a cracked jar. One evening you set up the merchant's stall in a town square nestled between a stony church and a muddy tavern. The villagers crowd around quickly. They point at the foreign trinkets, the glass beads, the tiny bottles labelled with impossible promises. Love in a vial, cure for gout, instant courage. Reynald is in his element, selling dreams with a silver tongue and a twinkle in his eye. You play your part perfectly, unpacking goods, collecting coins, pretending you're not exhausted. Thomas, the older apprentice, shoots you an approving glance when Reynald praises you for the first time. That's the spirit, boy. You feel a flicker of pride, tiny but real. Historians still argue whether apprenticeships offered upward mobility or simply prolonged suffering. In some cases, they were true ladders, climbable, with enough grit. In others, they were circular traps, keeping children in perpetual servitude. You don't yet know which path you're on. That night, after the coins are counted and the mule is fed, Reynald does something unexpected. He hands you a crust of bread, still warm, smeared with dripping honey. For a good day's work, he says. You blink at him, unsure whether it's a trick, but he walks off without another word. You sit under the stars, honey dripping down your fingers, and take the slowest bite of your life. It's absurd how delicious it is. Your stomach, long used to cold scraps and bitter roots, practically sings. And for a few precious minutes you believe this could work, until it doesn't. The next village is different, less friendly, less curious. A storm brews overhead as you roll into the square, and the people look at you and Reynald with narrowed eyes and muttered prayers. A man spits at your feet. Another crosses himself when he sees your mismatched clothes. You know that look. You've seen it before. You're not a merchant's boy to them. You're a curse on wheels, an omen. That night a stone hits the side of the cart. Then another. Reynald shouts, but no one answers. You and Thomas duck inside, holding your breath. You hear whispers, laughing, a sharp voice calling you witch spawn. In many villages, outsiders, especially travelling peddlers with odd goods, were suspected of witchcraft or disease carrying. And orphans? Doubly so. No roots, no ties, no proof you weren't born of sin. You barely sleep. By morning, the cart has been smeared with ash. The townsfolk won't buy a thing. Reynald is furious, cursing everyone from the villagers to the rain to you. You brought this on us, he growls. I should have left you where I found you. It stings, deeply. You don't cry. You just carry the crates and try not to think about Will or your old root cellar or that half-eaten pie you once shared. The next few days are quiet. Reynald barely speaks. Thomas avoids your eyes. You do your work in silence, waiting for the next storm. It comes, not from the sky this time, but from the cart. You're unloading jars when one slips from your hand. It shatters, red syrup spilling like blood across the dirt. Reynald freezes. That, he hisses, was worth more than your miserable life. He lashes out, backhand swift and hard. Your cheek explodes in pain. Your knees buckle. The world blurs. You don't fight back. You don't speak. You just nod, pick up the shards, and press your lips together until they stop shaking. Historians still argue whether apprentices were legally protected from abuse. Some towns had codes, some guilds enforced rules. But enforcement was rare, especially when the apprentice had no family, no money, no advocate. You have no one. That night, as the cart creaks along a narrow road, you wonder if this was a mistake. Maybe Will was right. Maybe this isn't a ladder. Maybe it's a cage. You lie awake, fingers tracing the blade of his old knife. Then, somewhere in the woods, a howl cuts through the night. Not a dog, something larger. The mule panics. The cart lurches. Crates tumble. Reynald shouts, yanking the reins. You scramble for balance, nearly thrown from the back. Then silence. You all freeze. Another howl. Closer this time. Reynold curses. Into the trees, he orders. You, Thomas and the merchant drag what you can, food, valuables, the crossbow, into a thicket just off the road. The cart remains, exposed and creaking. You huddle under branches, heart thudding. Wolves, maybe, or worse. You whisper to Thomas, "If I die, tell Will I didn't eat his last piece of jerky." He snorts despite himself. You don't sleep. The night passes in pieces, every rustle a threat. Dawn comes like a gift. The cart's been ransacked, not by wolves, by people, bandits maybe, or desperate villagers. Everything's gone. Reynold is livid, but for once he doesn't blame you, he just slumps to the ground, silent. The journey ends that day. He decides to return to the city. "No more apprentices," he mutters. Thomas nods. You don't. By sunset you've been given a loaf of bread and a single coin. Your wages, Reynold calls it. Then he points down a side road. "That way leads to the abbey," he says. "They might take you." You don't look back as he rides away. You walk alone again, but you walk differently now. You've learned how to carry a crate, how to haggle, how to pretend you belong, how to lie without blinking, how to read people's moods by the tilt of their heads. You've learned when to speak and when silence is your best defense. You've learned to survive. The abbey looms ahead, its towers etched against the sky like a warning or a promise. You square your shoulders. Time to knock on another door. The abbey towers above you, stone walls streaked with the residue of centuries. Ivy clings to every crack, and the bells echo across the valley, a constant reminder that life inside is regulated by prayer, ritual, and habit. You hesitate at the gate, one hand clutching your meagre bread, and the other curled tight around Will's knife, hidden in your pocket like a secret spell. You knock, once, twice. The door doesn't move, but a slot opens. A pair of eyes, bright and suspicious, meets yours. "State your business," the voice croaks. You try to stand tall, to sound older, braver. "I need shelter. I can work. Please." The slot closes. You hear footsteps. Then, with the slow groan of iron hinges, the door creaks open. A monk in a faded brown habit stands before you. His face is round and blotchy, but there's no malice in his eyes, just exhaustion. He lets you in, closes the door behind you. "What's your name?" You hesitate. "Will," you say, and your heart thuds at the lie. It's easier this way. Easier to carry your friend with you. Easier to pretend you're not the same lost child who slept in barns, ditches, cellars and carts. The monk leads you across a courtyard full of lavender and rosemary. The air here is cleaner, sweeter. Birds flutter in and out of the cloisters, and a few novices sweep the stone walkways in silence. The world slows down inside these walls, every movement measured and meaningful. You're ushered into a small room where another monk, a much older man with eyebrows that seem to belong to a separate creature entirely, sizes you up. He asks the usual questions. Are you alone? Are you baptized? Are you sick or contagious? You answer with the truth when you can, and with vague shrugs when you can't. Historians still argue whether medieval abbeys genuinely offered sanctuary to lost children, or simply used them as cheap labour. From where you stand, the line is blurry. You're not picky. A roof is a roof. They let you wash in a stone basin, the cold water biting your fingers. You scrub until your skin burns, watching weeks of dirt swirl away. They bring you a rough tunic, coarse but clean, and a bowl of hot broth so fragrant it makes your eyes water. You eat slowly, savouring every bite, determined not to draw attention by wolfing it down. After, you're led to a dormitory. Long wooden benches, rows of straw pallets, the air heavy with the smell of candles, sweat and old parchment. Other boys sleep there, mostly older. Their faces pinched and pale. A few glance up as you enter, then look away. You're just another shadow in a long procession of lost children. Your first night in the abbey is both better and worse than you expect. The bed is softer than most you've known, but the silence is dense, pressing in from every side. At midnight the bells ring, summoning the monks to prayer. You lie awake, staring at the wooden beams, listening to footsteps on stone, wondering if you've traded one kind of loneliness for another. In the morning the abbey wakes before dawn. The boys are marched to the chapel, lined up like beads on a string. The monks chant in Latin, their voices echoing off cold stone. You mouth the words you know, stumble over the rest. No one scolds you. There are too many boys, too few monks. After prayers comes breakfast, a thin porridge, sometimes sweetened with a scrap of honey if someone's in a good mood. Then chores, scrubbing floors, weeding gardens, copying lines from ancient books. You're assigned to the kitchen, peeling root vegetables until your fingers cramp. It's monotonous, but you lose yourself in the rhythm, grateful for structure after so much chaos. The abbey cook claims carrots help you see in the dark, though you're pretty sure that's just her way of getting you to eat the woody, misshapen ones. Days at the abbey blend together, marked by bells, prayer, work, meal, prayer, study, prayer again. There's little talking. You grow used to the stillness, learning to listen to the world's smallest sounds, the scrape of a quill, the whistle of wind through the cloister arches, the low hum of bees in the garden. You make few friends. Most of the boys are as wary as you, each guarding their own story. But there's one, Simon, who shares his bread with you one morning and later teaches you how to sneak scraps from the kitchen. He's been here a year, he says, and claims the abbot keeps a pet owl in his office that can sniff out lies. Simon swears that if you ever get caught napping during prayers, the owl will peck your toes until you confess. You don't know whether to believe him, but you keep your toes hidden just in case. Work at the abbey isn't easy, but it's not cruel. The monks expect diligence, discipline, humility. There are rules, many rules. Speak only when spoken to, wash your hands before entering the refectory, never touch the sacred relics, always bow to the abbot. But there are no beatings, and the punishments, when they come, are chores or extra prayers. Historians still argue whether these strict environments save children's souls or just smother their spirits. You sense both are true. There's safety in order, but you can't help but feel caged. Your dreams grow smaller. A second helping at dinner, a dry blanket, maybe a book with your own name in it someday. Sometimes, in quiet moments, you sneak out to the garden and stare at the sky. You think of Will, of your parents, of the wild root cellar and the long, hungry nights. You remember the pain and the freedom, the danger and the laughter. You wonder if you'll ever see Will again, if he's safe, if he remembers you, if he'd recognize you now. The Abbey Library contains more books than you've seen in your entire life, and you sometimes imagine sneaking in at night to read them all, one candle at a time. Your favourite task when you can get it is tending to the bees. The monk in charge, Brother Peter, is patient, and the bees, for the most part, ignore you. You learn not to fear their stings, to move slowly, to speak softly. Brother Peter teaches you that bees have a queen and a purpose, and that their lives, though short, are spent building something bigger than themselves. He says it's a lesson for all orphans. You don't know if he's right, but you like the smell of honey on your hands. Months pass. You grow stronger, less hungry. You memorize the rhythms of the abbey, the bell for prayer, the bell for study, the bell for meals. You begin to feel almost safe. Almost. But you never forget. Not really. You keep Will's knife under your pillow, hidden from the monks. You tell stories to Simon sometimes. Old stories. Made-up stories. Stories where lost children find their way home. You both laugh, but you both know the truth. Even in a place of God, you're still a guest, a visitor, a shadow waiting for morning. Historians still argue whether the abbeys truly gave orphans a future or simply kept them fed until adulthood spat them back out onto the road. The answer, you think, is somewhere in the silence that settles after the last bell, when the moon hangs over the cloisters and you lie awake, listening for a voice that will never come. One night, Simon nudges you awake. "Look," he whispers, pointing at the moonlit window. You see it, a white owl perched on the ledge, peering in with unblinking eyes. You both stifle your giggles, pressing your faces into the straw to keep quiet. For a moment you feel young, free, almost happy. And then the bell rings again, and you rise with the others, another orphan following the line, hoping always that tomorrow will bring something new. You're supposed to feel lucky, or at least safer, inside Abbey walls. There are no thieves creeping through the night, no village dogs biting at your ankles, no angry bakers or drunks shoving you aside. Meals, while plain and portioned, come with regularity. The routine means you know what's coming. No nasty surprises, no sudden beatings, no uncertain hunger. For a while, this is enough. It's what you imagine peace must feel like, even if you can't quite relax into it. But inside these thick stone walls, new challenges reveal themselves. There's no escaping the feeling that you're both protected and penned in, a tiny fish in a tidy pond. The Abbey's stone corridors echo every footstep. You're always watched, always reminded that you're here at someone else's mercy. Your first winter in the Abbey comes quickly, before you've learned all the rules. Outside, the land turns slick and brown, and bitter winds rattle the stained glass. The monks move more slowly, their faces red with cold as they trudge from prayer to meal to chores. You try to keep up, but your thin blood can't quite banish the chill that creeps under your blanket at night. The other boys teach you tricks, how to line your shoes with straw, how to tie rags around your hands, how to breathe into your collar to keep your neck warm as you sleep. The lucky ones have relatives in town or sponsors who send them an extra blanket at Christmas. You have Simon and his half loaf of bread, and the little knife from Will still hidden under your pillow. The days pass with the slow drag of winter. Chores double. The animals need extra care, and the monks trust the orphans to keep the fires burning in the kitchens and the scriptorium. Your knuckles crack and bleed, and you go to bed every night with soot under your nails and smoke in your hair. The Abbey keeps a store of dried fish and turnips in a locked root cellar. The older boys swear there's a secret tunnel underneath it, dug by monks to escape raiders 100 years ago. Sometimes you wonder what you'd do if you found it. Where would you go? What would you become? You wonder most on the days when the monks take attendance and pause at your name, frowning. You never get used to that. Your will to them, a name borrowed from a friend, but it's never yours in your heart. Every time a roll call stumbles over it, you feel a tug of guilt and loss. Maybe you could confess to the abbot, but you don't. You keep the secret. It's all you have left from your old life. One morning during chores, you're called into the abbot's study. The room is warm, lined with books and jars of ink, the air thick with candle wax and old leather. The abbot himself is ancient, with eyes like flint and a beard that spills over his chest like fresh snow. He peers at you over steepled fingers. "You've worked hard, Will," he says, rolling the name on his tongue. "You're not the brightest, perhaps, but you're steady. That counts for more than you think." You nod, unsure where this is going. The abbot continues. "It is our custom for those who show diligence to offer training, a chance to learn reading, numbers, even a trade." You blink, surprised. No one's ever offered you a future before, only another day. "Would you like to learn?" he asks. You nod so hard your teeth chatter, and so it begins. You're given an old primer, patched and worn, its pages soft with age. Simon helps you with your letters at night, mouthing the words as you copy them in the margins. The letters wobble and slip, but you persist, tongue sticking out in concentration. Soon you can write your own name, your real name, hidden in tiny script on the last page, just for you. Historians still argue whether orphan education in medieval abbeys was true charity, or a practical means to ensure a supply of literate scribes and workers. You don't care. To you, the shapes and sounds of words are a kind of magic. You remember lines from the Psalms, phrases from the Gospels. "The Lord is my shepherd." You think about sheep a lot these days. With your new skills comes new work. You're allowed into the scriptorium, where old brother Matthew shows you how to grind ink from oak galls and sharpen a goose quill. The air is cold, but the room is always lit by candles and the silent, fluttering movement of hands across vellum. You copy lines from ancient texts, your letters uneven but growing bolder. You're proud, but it's exhausting. Your fingers ache, your eyes blur, and you sometimes nod off, waking to find a small pool of drool on the edge of a priceless manuscript. The monks joke about it, but not unkindly. Even Brother Matthew smiles, a rare treat. One afternoon, Simon bets you a week's worth of bread that you can't sneak a joke into the margin of a psalter. You try, writing "God save the turnip" in tiny script near the bottom of the page. 2 days later, you hear a novice recite it at prayers, voice dead serious. You and Simon laugh until you cry. Outside, winter rages. Inside, you adapt. You learn to find warmth wherever you can. A sunbeam sneaking through the cloister, a mug of weak ale, a joke whispered during chores, a moment spent humming an old tune you barely remember. Still, you're not immune to the Abbey's darker moments. One boy falls ill, a cough that never goes away. Another vanishes overnight, rumoured to have run away, or been sent to work in the bishop's kitchens. The monks never speak of it, but the boys whisper in the dormitory, trading theories like crumbs. You try not to dwell on it, but it gnaws at you, a reminder that safety here is conditional, fragile. Historians still argue whether Abbey life truly prepared orphans for the world beyond or simply kept them docile. You know now that you're growing stronger physically, mentally, but you also sense that a life here is just another stop on the long, unpredictable road of survival. Spring comes late. The world thaws slowly, as if reluctant to trust the sun. When the earth finally softens, the Abbey gardens come alive. You're assigned to help Brother Peter with the bees and the kitchen gardens. It's honest work, dirty and sometimes dull, but you like the feel of soil under your nails, the hum of the hive in your ears. Brother Peter teaches you the names of every plant: yarrow for wounds, sage for fever, lavender for sleep. He shows you how to coax carrots from stubborn ground, how to chase beetles without crushing the tender shoots, how to tell when the honey is ripe for harvest. Brother Peter claims that if you whisper a secret wish to a bee and it lands on your finger, your wish will come true. You try it, whispering, "Bring Will back to me." The bee lands, but you're old enough to know better than to wait for magic. You and Simon sometimes sneak into the orchard at dusk, racing between the apple trees, daring each other to climb higher, laugh louder, run faster. The monks scold you, but you see them smiling behind their sleeves. For a little while you feel like a child again. But with spring comes new arrivals, other orphans, lost boys, a few girls taken in from burned villages or far-off manors. Some are silent, hollowed out by grief. Others are wild, quick to fight, slow to trust. You see yourself in them, a reflection that's hard to look at. You take care to help them when you can, sharing bread, a joke, a lesson in how to stay out of Brother Benedict's way. You teach them the trick with straw in the shoes, show them the warmest corner in the dormitory, how to avoid the abbot's questions on a bad day. You try to give them what no one gave you: advice, comfort, a hand up. Historians still argue whether orphans in religious care grew up to trust one another or if they became competitors for scraps and favours. In your experience, a little kindness spreads like fire in dry hay, quick, fierce, and impossible to contain. Summer arrives suddenly, as if someone opened a door. The gardens burst with life, the bees hum louder, the air fills with the sweet scent of clover and sweat. Chores increase, and the Abbey's work never ends. But the world feels larger, the sky higher, the horizon brighter. You spend your spare moments in the scriptorium copying texts, dreaming of writing your own stories one day. You've grown taller, stronger. Your hands are steady, your eyes sharper. Simon, too, is changing, his face losing its softness, his laugh deeper and more confident. You wonder if he'll stay here, become a monk, or if he'll leave, like so many before him. One afternoon, you're called into the abbot's study again. He hands you a letter, your name, written in careful script. "You're being sent to the city," he says. "There's a guildmaster in need of an apprentice. He asked for a boy who can read, write, and work hard. I gave him your name." You stare at the letter, heart racing. A guild apprenticeship is the closest thing to a future you've ever been offered. You don't know whether to cry or run or hug the old abbot. Simon hugs you first. "You'll make it," he says. "Just remember us when you're rich." You pack your few belongings, Will's knife, your primer, a scrap of Simon's blanket. You say goodbye to the abbey, to Brother Peter and his bees, to the dormitory full of boys who once seemed like ghosts and now feel like brothers. You walk out the gates at dawn, heart pounding, eyes wide, the road stretching ahead like a promise. Historians still argue whether orphans ever truly escaped their pasts, or if they carried it with them forever, a shadow stitched to their heels. You don't know. You just keep moving, one foot in front of the other, chasing the future like a child chasing the sun. Your journey to the city begins on a morning so bright it feels like the world is giving you a new chance on purpose. The abbot presses a small parcel into your hand, a hard crust of bread, a lump of cheese, and a folded piece of parchment that serves as your introduction to the guildmaster. Simon gives you a crooked smile and a playful punch on the arm, pretending not to care that you're leaving, but his eyes are red-rimmed and shining, and you hug him tightly before you go. The abbey doors close behind you with a weighty thud. For a moment you hesitate, standing on the road, not quite sure which direction to go. The letter in your hand is both a ticket and a tether, an official hope, stamped and sealed. The other orphans wave from the courtyard and you raise a hand in farewell, promising yourself you'll write back, even though you're not sure where to send the letter. The road to the city is long, winding through rolling hills dotted with sheep and the occasional hut. You fall into a rhythm. Walk, eat, rest. Walk, eat, rest. Each step puts more distance between you and the abbey, but also between you and the child you used to be, the one who slept in barns, scavenged for crusts, and ran from every angry voice. Now you're heading somewhere on purpose, not just running away. You pass small villages, most no more than a cluster of huts and a tired dog guarding a heap of turnips. Sometimes the villagers stare, sometimes they ignore you. You keep moving, sleeping in haylofts when you can, under hedges when you must. You share your bread with a stray cat one night, and in return she curls beside you and purrs so loudly you think it might warm the whole world. Historians still argue whether medieval roads were more dangerous than cities themselves. Bandits, wild animals, and disease haunted the highways, but you encounter mostly silence, mud, and the endless curiosity of crows. You watch them strut along fence posts, tilting their heads as if judging your worth. You joke aloud. I bet you've seen more orphans than priests, and a nearby farmer snorts with laughter, tossing you a bruised apple in silent approval. There's a tradition in some villages that if you see 3 crows before noon, you'll have good luck. You start counting crows every morning, sometimes giving yourself a little cheer when you spot the lucky trio. It doesn't make the bread softer or the hills less steep, but it makes you smile. On your 3rd day, rain catches you halfway between hamlets. It pours in that insistent sideways way that soaks you to the skin within minutes. You hurry to a copse of trees, shivering, clutching your parcel. A farmer's wife sees you, and, with only a little grumbling, lets you sit under her porch until the worst has passed. She brings you a mug of weak beer and half a boiled potato. "Where are you headed, boy?" she asks, not unkindly. "To the city," you say, and she raises her eyebrows. "Be careful," she warns. "Big towns chew up little fish." That night you dream of Simon, of the abbey bees, and of Will, his knife still hidden in your bundle. In your dream, Will's running through the city streets ahead of you, always just out of reach, laughing, turning corners before you can catch up. The city rises from the plain like a story you half remember. Spires, towers, rooftops crowded together in a patchwork of red and slate. The air smells different here. Sharper, more complicated, laced with smoke, spice, and the faint promise of something burning. At the gates, a guard stops you, glances at your bundle, then at your face. "Business?" he asks, bored. You show him the letter from the abbey and he waves you through with a grunt. "Keep to the main road, don't cause trouble." Inside, the city is chaos. Carts rattle down stone streets, Children weave through the crowds, dogs bark and bark and bark. Everywhere you look, there's something happening. A woman shouting at a chicken, a group of men rolling dice in a shadowed alley, a beggar singing a song so old it could be the bones of the city itself. You ask for directions to the guild hall, and after several wrong turns and a close encounter with a fishmonger's pail of slops, you find the right building. A tall, timber-framed house with a sign showing a golden hammer and quill. You take a deep breath, clutch your letter, and knock. A man opens the door, a mountain in an apron, beard like a bird's nest, arms thick with muscle. He looks you up and down. "What's your business?" You stammer, hand shaking as you offer the letter. He breaks the seal, reads it silently, then grunts. "Follow me." You're led through a maze of hallways to an office where a man in a velvet doublet sits, quill poised over a ledger. The guildmaster. He reads the letter, eyes flickering over your face. "You can read?" he asks. "Yes, sir." "Right?" "Yes, sir, a little." He nods, considering. "Ever done honest work?" You blink, then nod again. "Yes, sir, chores at the abbey, carrying, copying, tending bees." He smiles. "Barely." "We'll see." You're shown to a small room under the eaves, a narrow bed, a stool, and a cracked pitcher of water. To you, it might as well be a palace. You sleep like you haven't slept in years. Your apprenticeship begins at dawn. The guild hall is a blur of noise and industry. Boys and men hauling crates, pounding copper, binding books, counting coins. Your first job is sweeping the workshop, then running errands, ink to the scribe, wool to the dyer, ledgers to the merchant. The work is relentless, but it feels different from the abbey's chores. Here, every task is a step towards something, a craft, a trade, maybe even respect. You fumble and drop things, of course. The older apprentices snicker. One, a red-haired boy named Hal, trips you for fun and calls you Abbey Mouse. But most just ignore you, too busy with their own duties. Historians still argue whether guild apprenticeships truly offered social mobility or merely disguised another kind of servitude. Here, you can feel both truths rubbing together like stones, sparks sometimes, but mostly friction. Your reading helps. You're called to copy numbers from the merchant's ledger, and the steward nods approvingly at your neat, careful script. The scribes teach you to sharpen a quill, how to seal letters with wax, how to count and recount the coins so you don't get shorted at market. The Guildhall keeps a pet goose, fat and mean. That's considered lucky. It waddles around the courtyard, nipping at careless apprentices. The steward claims it once chased a thief off the property, honking so loudly the whole neighbourhood woke up. You learn quickly to steer clear of its beak. After a few weeks, you're assigned to help the coppersmith. It's hard work, your hands raw and blistered, arms aching from hauling and hammering, but the smith, Master Aldous, is less strict than you expect. He doesn't shout, just gestures and waits for you to catch on. He shows you how to heat the metal, how to strike it just so, how to test for flaws with your thumb and a practiced eye. You fail often at first. The other apprentices laugh. Master Aldous just shrugs and hands you another piece. You'll learn, or you won't. Either way, the work goes on. You fall into the city's rhythm. Up before dawn, chores all day, sometimes lessons at night from the steward or one of the scribes. You eat with the other apprentices, sharing a bench and a pot of thick stew. You sleep deeply, bone-tired, but your dreams are brighter now, full of fire and copper, words written in strong black ink, Simon and Will laughing together in a sunlit orchard. Sometimes you slip away after supper, walking the city's crooked lanes as the lamps flicker to life. You watch the market stalls close, the beggars settle by the church doors, the taverns fill with laughter and music. You hear stories of ships arriving from distant ports, of plagues that emptied whole streets, of a mad woman who predicts futures with a deck of painted cards. One night, you ask the card reader if you'll ever be rich. She looks you up and down, then says, "You'll have a fortune if you can catch that goose first." You both laugh, though you're not sure who's being tricked. Some nights you write. Letters you never send, to Simon, to the Abbey, to Will. You tell them about the city, about the Guildhall, about the pet goose and the smithy, about how you're surviving. You tuck the letters into the bottom of your trunk, adding new ones as the weeks pass. The city is not gentle, but it's not cruel either. You learn to move quickly, to keep your head down, to listen more than you speak. You learn how to ask for help without seeming weak, how to bargain for better food, how to dodge the angry goose, how to stand your ground when Hal calls you mouse one too many times. One afternoon, the steward hands you a new task, delivering a letter to the Merchants' Guild across town. It's your first solo errand beyond the guild's walls. You tuck the letter into your tunic, double knot your belt and set off. The city is alive, pulsing with energy. You dodge carts and children, sidestep piles of refuse, pause to let a parade of pigs thunder past. You find the guild, deliver the letter, and receive a nod from the doorkeeper, a small recognition, but it feels enormous. Walking back, you pass the cathedral square. A crowd is gathered around a street performer, juggling knives, telling stories, pulling coins from behind children's ears. You watch, spellbound, until a voice catches your ear. "Need a friend, boy?" a thin man says, grinning wide. You shake your head, but he keeps talking, spinning tales of fortune, easy money, jobs for clever lads. You remember every warning you've ever received and step away, ducking into an alley, heart pounding. Historians still argue whether city life was safer for orphans than village life, or if the dangers just changed shape. You're starting to understand. Survival here isn't about avoiding hunger and cold, but about avoiding the people who see you as prey. You hurry home, chest tight but head held high. You made it. You delivered the letter. You saw the world and returned safely. In the evenings, you share your food with another new apprentice, a younger boy, scared and quiet, with eyes too big for his face. You show him where the warmest spot on the floor is, how to fold his blanket for extra comfort, how to avoid the goose. You remember Brother Peter's bees and the lesson of the hive. Build together, survive together. As summer deepens, the work grows harder. The coppersmith trusts you to carry more, to hammer more. The steward lets you tally coins unsupervised. You catch Hal watching you with less scorn and more respect. Sometimes you even win a round of jokes at dinner. The city celebrates a festival each midsummer. Fires in the streets, cakes baked with honey, people wearing wildflower crowns and singing until sunrise. You join in, laughing with the other apprentices, watching fireworks burst like stars above the rooftops. For the first time, you let yourself feel lucky. Maybe you are. Historians still argue whether orphans ever truly found a home. You don't have the answer yet. But as you drift asleep after the festival, the city's music echoing in your dreams, you know you've made it one more day. You're not just surviving now, you're learning, building, dreaming. And somewhere in the city, under the same wide sky, you hope Will is too. Autumn arrives with little warning. The city's air sharpens, the markets fill with the scent of roasting chestnuts and drying apples, and the apprentices' breath clouds as they trudge to morning work. For you, the change in season brings a fresh awareness of time passing, a subtle reminder that you're not the same child who first crept into this place with a letter and a bundle of hope. Your hands are stronger now, fingers calloused and stained with copper dust, your eyes less quick to widen at every city oddity. Routine, once a foreign thing, now rules your days. You rise with the bell, sometimes before it, wash at the communal pump, dress in your apprentice's tunic, and join the others in the long, echoing hall for breakfast. The food is simple: porridge, a hunk of bread, maybe a slice of last night's cheese if the cook is feeling generous. You eat quickly, listening to the other boys boast about how much they lifted, what they dropped, which master was worst. Hal, your red-haired tormentor, is no longer the loudest voice. In fact, you've noticed a change in him, a grudging respect perhaps, or just boredom with old jokes. Sometimes he helps you carry crates. Once, when you burned your hand on a hot pot, he handed you a cool cabbage leaf without a word. Historians still argue whether medieval apprentices truly formed lifelong bonds, or if city life kept everyone on guard, always ready for the next bit of bad luck. In your little corner of the guild hall, you feel something like friendship beginning to take root. You even catch yourself laughing at Hal's stories, sharing the chores with less resentment and more rhythm. Your work grows more complex. Master Aldous lets you try your hand at actual smithing. Nothing grand, just simple hooks and buckles at first, but he watches you closely and corrects your grip with a patient nudge. He demonstrates how to fold the copper, how to test its strength, how to polish the finished product until it shines like sunrise after rain. He says little, but one evening as you finish a serviceable set of clasps, he nods once. "You're learning," he says. "Keep at it." That's all you need. The copper shop cats have learned that apprentices drop the best scraps. You make a habit of slipping the youngest, a one-eyed Tom called Crooktail, a tidbit every day. In return, Crooktail curls by your feet when the nights turn cold. City superstition says a cat sleeping near you keeps away nightmares and thieves. Meanwhile, your lessons in reading and numbers continue. You're tasked with recording purchases, tallying orders, sometimes even writing a letter at the steward's dictation. The steward begins to rely on you for small things. A list here, an inventory there. "Fast and neat, boy," he says. "No one likes a messy ledger." You take pride in your careful script. The city itself is a classroom. At market you learn the patter of the haggler, the careful squint of the buyer, the way a sharp eye can spot a counterfeit coin before the merchant's even finished his pitch. On errands you walk past temples where children, better dressed, cleaner, quieter, recite their lessons in Latin to bored tutors. You watch them from a distance, wondering what it would be like to study for learning's sake, not just survival. You save your small earnings, copper coins hidden in a sock at the bottom of your trunk. You dream of one day buying a real knife, or a new pair of shoes, or even, dare you hope, a book of your own. Historians still argue whether literacy truly changed the fate of a medieval orphan. Some scholars claim it was the single biggest advantage a poor child could have. Others say even the most literate apprentice rarely rose above his station. You feel the tug of both arguments, but you cling to your skills like a lifeline. No one can take them from you. You're not immune to the city's dangers, of course. One evening, you witness a fight in the alley outside the guild. Two older apprentices, angry and drunk, swinging at each other with fists and curses. The steward breaks it up with a slap and a shout, but one boy is sent packing, his trunk dumped in the gutter, his name scratched off the ledger. It's a reminder. You're safe, but only if you follow the rules. Later that week, you're sent with Hal to deliver a box of copper buckles to the port. The docks are wild, sailors shouting, carts rattling, gulls swooping in for scraps. The water smells of salt and fish, and everything seems bigger, louder, a little more dangerous. You catch Hal staring at a ship moored near the far pier. It's painted bright blue, flags snapping in the wind. "Ever think of running off?" he asks, voice low. You shrug. "Maybe, but I wouldn't know where to go." He grins. "Me neither, but it's nice to think about." You both watch as the crew hauls barrels aboard, shouting in a dozen different tongues. For a moment you imagine yourself sailing away, leaving the city and your past behind. But you know you'd miss the shop, the cats, even Hal's endless teasing. On the way back you pass a line of beggars huddled in a church portico. One of them is a boy, younger than you, clothes torn, face smudged with dirt. He watches you with hungry eyes. You glance at Hal, who nods almost imperceptibly. Together you slip him a heel of bread and coin. Silent charity, a gesture of kinship you both understand. There's a local superstition that sharing bread with a stranger brings 7 days of luck. You and Hal agree to count your luck just in case. Work, lessons and life blur together as autumn deepens. The guild prepares for the winter market, and the apprentices labour from dawn to dusk, polishing, packing, loading wagons. The steward becomes more exacting, Master Aldous more distant. Tempers fray, and exhaustion sets in. But you push through, finding strength in the routine and the rare, quiet moments you can steal for yourself. One such moment comes one windy night, when you sit in the workshop after hours, turning over Will's old knife in your hands. It's dull now, the handle smoothed by years in your pocket. You remember every place you've carried it. Barns, cellars, abbey cots, city streets. You whisper your story to it, as if the blade itself holds the secret to survival. Historians still argue whether objects really hold memory, or if it's just a way for lonely people to comfort themselves. You don't care. The knife is your proof that you've endured, that you belong somewhere, even if that place keeps changing. One morning, Crooktail steals your bread from your bench. You chase him around the shop, tripping over buckets, only to find the cat has eaten everything but the crust. "You owe me," you grumble. The steward, overhearing, mutters, "Better a cat than a rat." For a week afterward, the apprentices call you cat bait. The nights grow colder and frost rims the windows. You bundle in every blanket you can find, huddling close with the other apprentices for warmth. In the dim hours before dawn, you tell stories, tales of haunted abbeys, midnight ships, treasure buried beneath the city. Even Hal listens, caught up in the magic of what could be. A letter arrives from the abbey, delivered by a merchant passing through. It's from Simon. He writes of new boys, of Brother Peter's bees, of the owl that still watches from the rafters. He asks about the city, about your work, about whether you've made friends. His words are awkward, but you feel their weight. You read the letter aloud to Hal, who shrugs but smiles. Tell him the city's not so bad, just watch out for the goose. You write back on a scrap of parchment, careful to use your neatest script. You tell Simon about the guild, about Crooktail, about Hal and the workshop, and the time you nearly set your tunic on fire in the forge. You fold the letter with care, tucking it into the merchant's pack, and hope it finds its way home. The winter market approaches, a time of noise and chaos, stalls bursting with goods, townsfolk and travellers crowding the square. The apprentices are everywhere, hawking wares, fetching food, polishing buckles until their arms ache. You work harder than ever, driven by the hope of a bonus. A coin, a loaf, a new pair of socks if you're lucky. During a rare break, you watch the townsfolk bustle past. Merchants arguing, children chasing each other, beggars pleading for alms. For the first time, you see the city as a place you belong, not just a stop on the way to somewhere else. You stand straighter, feeling the weight of your name, your skills, your hard-won place in this noisy, crowded world. That night, as you lie in your bunk, you whisper a silent thank you to Simon, to Will, to every lost friend and kind stranger who helped you along the way. You're not a ghost anymore, you're not invisible, you're here, and for now, that's enough. Winter deepens. By late afternoon, darkness creeps down the narrow alleys and glistens on the slushy cobbles, the city breathing slow and heavy under the weight of cold. You wake up most mornings with Crooktail, the shop cat, nestled in the crook of your knees and a sheet of frost etching the inside of the tiny apprentice window. The Guildhall feels closer, almost cosy, as if every living soul inside is pushed together by necessity and habit. There's less shouting, fewer pranks. Even Hal softens a little, sharing his blanket and passing you extra bread when the kitchen's not looking. But the city's cold is relentless, and for an orphan, you never quite forget what it's like to be on the outside. You see it in the faces pressed to the frosted glass of the bakery, in the hollow eyes of the beggar children that cluster around the church doors for handouts. Whenever you can, you slip them a crust, remembering too well the flavour of hunger and humiliation. Work at the guild is harder than ever. Winter means extra orders, hooks for hanging pots over fires, buckles for heavy cloaks, pots, pins and candle holders by the dozen. Your hands crack and bleed, and at night you smear grease into your knuckles and bandage them with rags. The copper shop glows like a furnace, and the hiss of water on hot metal is the background music of your life. Master Aldous rarely raises his voice. Instead he gestures or grunts, and you've learned to read the meaning in every twitch of his eyebrow. He expects more now. He leaves you to finish a batch on your own, then inspects it with a silent, stern expression. When he grunts approval, you feel a quiet pride blooming in your chest. Small, but real. One evening, as you scrub black dust from your face, Hal slumps beside you, tired, but grinning. "Reckon you'll be a master one day," he says, nudging you. "Or at least own more shoes than holes." You wiggle your toes through the largest hole in your sock and reply, "I'm building my own ventilation system. Next, copper-toed shoes." Hal laughs so loudly the steward throws a shoe at both of you. After work, the apprentices huddle around the kitchen fire. There are stories, jokes, even the occasional song. The oldest boy, Tom, teaches you a dirty limerick, which you promptly forget except for the last line. "That's the only part worth remembering," Tom insists, and the others hoot in agreement. Historians still argue whether guild apprenticeships truly transformed orphans into skilled tradesmen, or merely kept them fed until they aged out, ready for the next hardship. In your heart, you know it's a bit of both. You're stronger, smarter, less afraid. But the past clings to you like a second skin, impossible to shed completely. The city outside is restless. There's talk of trouble, prices rising, food growing scarce, even rumours of thieves prowling the richer quarters. The master's wife is nervous, checking locks twice before bed. You notice more guards in the streets, torches flaring brighter against the early dark. At market, you overhear a merchant grumbling about hungry wolves in rags prowling for scraps. One cold afternoon, you're sent with Hal to deliver a shipment to a baker in a wealthier part of town. The houses are bigger here, glass windows glittering, gardens walled off against the world. You catch sight of children in fine cloaks laughing, tossing snowballs. They barely notice you, two apprentices with a handcart, faces red from the wind. The baker, Mrs. Crow, greets you with the distracted warmth of someone who has always had enough. She checks the order, frowns at a slightly dented pot, then shrugs and waves you to the kitchen for a mug of cider and a slice of dense winter cake. It's sweet and full of dried apples, and you savour every bite. Hal, bold as ever, asks if she has any old bread. "For the alley cats," he claims. Mrs. Crow eyes him for a moment, then produces a bag of stale rolls. "See, they get it," she says, and you both thank her with solemn nods. On the way home, Hal tosses rolls to the beggars near the church steps. One girl, maybe 6 or 7, with wild curls and a patched dress, beams up at you, cradling the bread like treasure. Her eyes remind you of yourself, not so long ago in a different city in the shadow of a monastery. You wonder what her story is. You wonder if anyone will ever write it down. Quirky fact: there's a saying among city children that if you sleep with bread under your pillow, you'll dream of feasts. You decide to try it that night, tucking a crust beneath your thin blanket. Your dream is a hazy blur of honey, roast goose, and laughter echoing through a warm kitchen. The days slip by. Snow falls, then melts into grey slush. Crooktail disappears for a week, only to return fatter and limping, a mysterious red ribbon tied around his tail. Tom claims he's been living the high life at the mayor's house, eating caviar with the fancy folk. The apprentices take turns inventing stories about Crooktail's secret life, each wilder than the last. Your letters to Simon at the abbey grow longer, your script neater, your stories brighter. He writes back about the boys, the bees, Brother Peter's garden. He says the abbey's library now has 3 more books, so many pages, so few eyes to read them all. He tells you he misses your stories and signs every letter, your brother, by luck, if not by blood. Historians still argue whether bonds made in childhood can outlast distance, poverty, and time. You cling to Simon's letters like driftwood on a dark sea, reminders that you're not as alone as you once believed. A sickness sweeps through the city, nothing like the great plagues of history, but enough to fill the guild's sick room and send a chill through every household. You're lucky, escaping with nothing more than a cough and a sore throat. Hal is less fortunate, laid up for a week shivering and pale. You bring him broth, keep the fire stoked, and retell your worst jokes until he finally hurls a pillow at your head. "You're killing me faster than the fever," he groans, but he smiles as he says it. The city's mood sours as food grows scarce. Fights break out at the market. The guild tightens its belt, rationing meals, working apprentices longer hours. You miss Simon, you miss the abbey gardens and Brother Peter's quiet wisdom. Some nights you miss Will so much it aches. One evening, as the wind howls and the shutters rattle, Master Aldous gathers the apprentices. "Times are hard," he says quietly, "but you're part of this house now. We look out for our own." You glance around, seeing yourself in the faces beside you. No one laughs, no one boasts. For once, even Tom is silent. A few nights later, there's a knock at the back door. The steward opens it to reveal a shivering figure, clutching a bundle to his chest. It's a boy, ragged, hungry, barely able to speak. He's an orphan, lost and alone, his name trembling on his lips. The steward hesitates, but Master Aldous nods. "Bring him in, warm him up. We can always use another hand." You make room in your bunk, share your blanket, pass him a piece of bread. You tell him about Crooktail, about Hal and Tom, about the first day you came to the city, scared and hungry and lost. Joke time. You promise him that if he's nice to the shop cat, Crooktail will let him use the good pillow, which is, of course, just an old sack, but the boy laughs anyway. As winter's grip finally loosens, the guild feels different. Stronger somehow for having survived another season together. You sense the change in yourself too. You're not just an apprentice, not just a survivor. You're a part of something, maybe even the start of a legacy. Work resumes its relentless pace as spring approaches. New orders flood in. You're trusted to train the newest arrivals, teach them the rules, show them where to stash an extra crust for lean days. Hal claims you've gone soft, like a real older brother. You chase him around the shop with a broom in mock outrage, both of you laughing so loudly the master's wife shakes her head but lets it go. Historians still argue whether orphans ever truly leave behind the ache of loneliness, or if it's just hidden beneath routine, friendship and hard-earned pride. As you walk through the city streets at dusk, head high, heart light, you believe that even if the ache never leaves, it can be softened by work, by laughter, by the gentle presence of a shop cat with a mysterious past. You pause on a bridge over the city river, watching the water sweep past, black and shining under the moon. You whisper a thank you to the wind, for Simon, for Will, for Hal, for Crooktail, for every act of kindness and every scrap of bread. You're not who you were, and you're not who you'll be yet, but tonight you are enough. You turn for home, the Guildhall's windows warm with lamplight, the air full of the promise of spring, and the faint, unmistakable smell of bread baking somewhere in the distance. Spring surges through the city almost overnight, brushing the rooftops with fresh green, sweetening the air with blossoms and hope. The apprentices wake to birdsong and shafts of sunlight slanting through the dormitory shutters. The world feels bigger, more forgiving, as if winter's long darkness has finally been paid off in warmth. You stretch your arms, feeling muscles that are thicker than they were a year ago. It's hard to believe sometimes that you're the same child who once slept in abandoned barns and dreamed of nothing but a scrap of bread and a safe place to hide. You're stronger now. You belong. Yet spring also stirs a kind of longing in your bones, the urge to move, to explore, to see what lies beyond the crooked city streets. Work at the guild shifts with the seasons. With the market bustling and trade booming, the shop grows busier each day. The doors are thrown open, letting in warm air and a parade of customers. Farmers trading copper coins for new pots, merchants haggling for buckles and hinges, even the mayor's wife stopping by to inspect a fancy copper mirror. You and Hal become a team, moving in sync as you load wagons, polish goods and bargain with customers. The older apprentices sometimes let you lead, and for the first time you catch glimpses of what your future might hold. A master's apron, your own apprentice someday, a life built on more than just survival. Joke time. One afternoon, Hal bets you a penny you can't sell an ugly lopsided candlestick to the snootiest noble in town. You agree, put on your most solemn face, and spin a wild tale about how it was forged on the night of a rare comet, guaranteed to bring luck and long life. The noble buys it, convinced, and Hal nearly chokes laughing. You're wasted as a smith. You should have been a bard. Quirky fact. In the spring, city children hang garlands over doorways and weave wildflowers into the manes of every passing horse for good luck. You and the other apprentices join in, sneaking out after dark to crown Crooktail, who endures his floral tiara with a haughty glare. On market days, the city square bursts with noise and colour. Jugglers toss pins, musicians play pipes and drums, food vendors hawk pies, roasted nuts and honey cakes. You slip away during breaks to watch the performers, marvelling at their skill, their laughter, their easy way with the crowd. Historians still argue whether the medieval city was more a trap or a promise for the poor, but for you, spring makes everything feel possible. You and Hal talk sometimes of leaving, seeing the sea, joining a merchant's caravan, maybe even visiting the abbey to surprise Simon. But for now, the city is enough. It's home. With the longer days comes more responsibility. The steward tasks you with keeping track of the weekly inventory, trusting your numbers more than most. Master Aldous lets you try more difficult projects, making door latches, fitting hinges, even a small copper pan that you polish until your reflection beams back at you, older and braver than you feel. Some evenings you escape to the riverside with Hal, Tom and the new boy Hugo, the one you helped bring in from the cold. You teach him the tricks you learned, how to stretch a crust of bread, how to grease raw hands, how to stay on the master's good side. You show him Will's knife, its blade now smooth from years of worry. It's good luck, you tell him, and he believes you. You hope it's true. River fishermen claim that the first orphan to touch the water each spring will catch the biggest fish that year. Hal dares you to run and splash in, and you do, boots and all, while the others cheer. Your toes freeze, but your spirit soars. One evening, after a day of hard work and harder laughter, the apprentices gather in the kitchen to celebrate a good week's pay. The master's wife brings out a special treat, honey cakes and warm cider. Even Crooktail gets a saucer of milk. You eat, talk, and share stories. Hal nudges you. Not bad for a bunch of strays, eh? You grin, feeling something rare and precious. Contentment. But spring is not just a season for new beginnings. It's also when old wounds stir. Sometimes as you walk home at dusk, you glimpse faces in the crowd. Thin, wary, orphaned like you once were. Some are swept up by the city, finding their place. Others slip through its cracks. Historians still argue whether medieval cities cared for their weakest or simply forgot them in the rush of daily business. You've seen both. You've been both. On a rainy afternoon, you spot a group of smaller children shivering in an alley, and you and Hal bring them a heel of bread and half a honey cake. Someone did it for me once, you say quietly. Time to pass it on. The city hums with life, but shadows always lurk at its edges. The beggars are still there, the poor still sleep under arches and bridges, the sick still wait for mercy at the church doors. You remember what it's like to be invisible, and you vow never to forget. There's a festival at the start of summer when every apprentice in the city gathers in the square to compete in games, racing, climbing, even a contest to see who can tell the tallest tale. Hal wins the race, you win for storytelling, and Hugo eats the most pies, becoming a local legend for a week. With every passing day, you find yourself more rooted and more restless. Sometimes you wake at night with dreams of Will, older, taller, waiting for you at the edge of a strange forest. Other nights, you dream of Simon at the abbey, bees humming, books piled high, laughter ringing through the cloisters. Letters arrive less often as spring turns to early summer. Simon writes of his own apprenticeship, tending the abbey gardens, learning to brew medicines with brother Peter. "I think I'll stay," he writes. "For now it feels like home." You smile at that. Knowing maybe you feel the same. Work continues. The city doesn't stop for anyone. There are always more orders, more lessons, more laughter, more exhaustion. But you've learned how to find rest in small things. A warm kitchen, a kind word, a cat's soft purr, a friend's nudge. Tom carves a little wooden goose and sneaks it into Hal's bed one morning. "For luck," he declares, and Hal yelps so loudly the entire guild comes running. For days, the goose is blamed for every mistake, every broken dish, every lost tool. You swear you see Crooktail smirking. As the season ripens, you realise you're not waiting for rescue anymore. You're not lost. You're not just surviving. You're living, even thriving. with all the stubborn joy of a weed pushing up through a crack in the city stone. Historians still argue whether orphans ever found true family in the places they landed, or if it was always something stitched together from scraps. You look around at your bunkmates, at the master's wife, at Crooktail, at Hugo grinning over his pie, and you know the answer. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's bread shared in the dark, laughter around a fire, a lucky knife tucked in your belt. You walk home late one evening, feet aching, heart light. The city glows, windows golden, voices rising into the starry sky. You pause on the doorstep of the Guildhall, breathing deep. Spring is ending, summer is coming, and for the first time you don't fear what's next. You turn the key, step inside, and let the door swing close behind you, a sound not of endings, but of home. Summer lands with a festival and a jolt, sunlight bouncing off every tile and copper roof, the city waking early and refusing to sleep until long after midnight. The streets buzz with the sound of carts, laughter, vendors hawking cherries and ribbons, church bells chiming the hour. Your days are packed from sunrise to sunset, heat waves shimmering off the forge, sweat beading on your brow, sleeves rolled up as you hammer out pots, pans and intricate candlesticks for customers richer than you'll likely ever be. But for the first time, you don't envy them as much. The ache of wanting, of feeling less than everyone else, has dulled, replaced by the steady pride of knowing how much you've learned. The Guildhall is more than shelter. It's the closest thing to a family you've known since those early years you think about less often now, except when a lost child's face on the street yanks you back without warning. The apprentices are in high spirits. The long hours are broken up by jokes, contests and secret competitions to see who can get Crooktail the cat to sleep on their bunk. Tom insists it's all in the way you fold your blanket. You and Hal know Crooktail only sleeps with whoever shares the most sausage. Market days turn into small adventures. You help set up the guild stall, polish the copper goods until they shine in the sun, and watch the crowds pour through the square. The city's full of visitors, peddlers, pilgrims, craftsmen from distant towns. There are foreign accents, bright clothes, new foods to try, tiny sugared plums, peppery sausages, spiced flatbreads that tingle on your tongue. You trade a few pennies for a cup of lemonade so sour it makes your eyes water, and the vendor laughs. You'll feel the cool in your toes, I promise. Hal bets you he can eat more sour plums than you without making a face. You both fail miserably, but the vendor rewards your effort with an extra handful and a wink. Orphan's luck, she says, as if the city owes you something after all. The guild's reputation grows. The steward nods at your careful bookkeeping, Master Aldous trusts you with trickier repairs, and sometimes, when the work's done, the master's wife sends you home with leftover pastries or a slice of roast. You savour every bite, and not just for the taste. It's the feeling of being seen, remembered, part of something beyond just your own hunger. Historians still argue whether orphan apprenticeships produce skilled craftsmen or simply used up a generation of desperate children. Standing at the forge, sleeves rolled, hands scarred but strong, you know you're becoming both, survivor and artisan, someone with a trade to offer and a story to tell. With the heat, tempers sometimes flare. The copper shop is stifling, the metal hot enough to burn just looking at it. Arguments snap out of nowhere. Tom and Hal bickering over whose turn it is to pump the bellows, the youngest, Hugo, sulking when teased for polishing instead of hammering. But there's always a joke or a gentle shove to break the tension, and you're learning slowly to let go of grudges. One afternoon the master gathers the apprentices. "We'll take stock at summer's end," he announces. "The best of you, quickest, cleverest, steadiest, will earn a bonus and my letter of recommendation. The rest, keep working." It's both challenge and promise, the kind that sets every heart pounding. That night the workshop hums with whispered dreams. Hopes of opening your own shop one day, travelling to distant cities, maybe sending for family left behind in villages you hardly remember. You lie awake, tracing Will's old knife with your thumb, remembering how impossible those dreams once seemed. There's an old city custom that apprentices who find a white feather during summer will receive unexpected good fortune before the year is out. You keep an eye out for feathers everywhere. Rooftops, alleys, market stalls, but mostly just find pigeon droppings. Work, sweat, repeat. But in the warm dusk you find moments of freedom. Swimming in the river with Hal and Hugo, skipping stones until your arms ache, or watching fireworks burst above the rooftops during Midsummer's festival. You laugh more now, even when you're tired, even when the city's noise threatens to swallow you whole. One sultry evening, you spot a familiar face at the market, a monk from the abbey, walking with the measured pace of someone used to silence. You rush over, almost tripping in your excitement. He recognizes you instantly and grins. "You've grown," he says, squeezing your shoulder. "Simon sends his greetings. He says you'd hardly fit in your old cot." You ask for news, hungry for a taste of your past. The monk tells you the abbey's bees are thriving. Simon has taken to teaching younger boys to read, and Brother Peter still claims he can talk to plants. He's well, the monk assures you. He hopes you are too. After the monk leaves, you sit on the fountain's edge, letting the cool spray dampen your face, thinking about Simon, the abbey, and all the lives you've lived. You realise you're not quite one thing or another anymore, not just an orphan, not just an apprentice, but something growing in between. It's a good feeling, and a strange one. Hugo tries to impress the market children by telling them you were raised by wolves and once arm-wrestled a bear. You only smile and wiggle your fingers like claws. The children gasp and scatter, but one brave girl hands you a wildflower for protection in case the bear comes back. As summer deepens, your responsibilities increase. The steward asks you to oversee the youngest apprentices, teaching them how to keep accounts, handle tools, and, most important of all, when to keep quiet and when to speak up. You see yourself in them, wary, eager, desperate to prove something. You tell them stories, pass along the old tricks, share your bread when you can. One night after everyone's asleep, Hal confides in you. "My apprenticeship's almost up. I want to stay, but sometimes I think about leaving, trying my luck somewhere new." You nod. "I think about it too, but I also think about what we've built here." Hal smiles, slow and genuine. "Maybe we're luckier than we thought." Historians still argue whether city orphans ever escaped the shadow of their beginnings, or if the past always lingered like a ghost at their heels. You feel the shadow sometimes, on lonely nights, in the flash of memory when a stranger's voice reminds you of your mother, or a smell in the market calls up a half-forgotten day in a distant village. But you also feel hope, bright and persistent as sunlight on copper. The city hosts a lantern festival as summer ends. Every apprentice receives a lantern to paint, and at dusk hundreds of coloured lights float along the river, drifting past bridges and out to sea. You paint yours with bees, wild flowers, and a small copper knife. When you release it into the current, you whisper a wish for Simon, for Will, for every child still searching for a home. The night of the festival, the city glows with lantern light. You and Hal join the crowd, watching your hopes float away on the water. The master finds you there, hands each of you a coin, and says, "Well done, both of you. The guild's better for having you in it." You try to reply but find your throat tight. Hal simply claps you on the back, grinning. Later, as you lie in your bunk, you realise you're not afraid of tomorrow. For the first time, you let yourself imagine growing old, wrinkled, gruff, still surrounded by stories and laughter. Maybe you'll train an apprentice of your own one day. Maybe you'll see Simon and Will again. Maybe you'll never truly outrun your past. But you'll keep building, keep hoping, keep loving the life you fought to create. You drift to sleep as Crooktail purrs at your feet, the faint scent of copper and bread in the air, and the city quiet outside your window. The last weeks of summer pass in a golden blur, the kind that leaves you with sunburned arms, tired hands, and memories that seem to glow at the edges when you close your eyes. You've never worked so hard or laughed so much, never felt the strange mix of exhaustion and contentment that comes from knowing finally you have a place and a purpose in the world. The guild is bustling. There's barely time to catch your breath between orders. wedding gifts for a rich merchant's daughter, copper pans for the baker's new kitchen, 100 candle holders for the upcoming harvest festival. Every apprentice has a job, every hand is needed. Master Aldous is everywhere at once, correcting a grip here, demonstrating a careful strike there. Even the steward, usually a hawk for mistakes, seems almost cheerful, nodding at your ledgers and offering half smiles when the numbers line up. The older apprentices, Tom and Hal, are nearly finished with their training. They talk about the future, about the day they'll earn their freedom papers and set out as journeymen, travelling from town to town, plying their trade, building reputations of their own. You feel a twinge of envy and something like dread. You're proud of them, but you don't want things to change. You don't want to lose the strange patchwork family you've built. But you know change is coming. It always does. Tom swears that when he leaves, he'll steal Crooktail and take him on the road as a cat of fortune. Hal says he'll start a bakery and let you burn all the bread you want. You joke back that you'll open a copper shop where every apprentice must recite a limerick before breakfast. The others groan but secretly love it. Crooktail naturally ignores you all. The city's rhythm changes as harvest approaches. The air is heavy with the scent of ripe fruit and hay, the streets clogged with carts full of wheat, apples, and squawking chickens. The festival brings in travellers from every village for miles, faces new and old, friends and rivals, even a few distant relatives of the guild's masters. The city feels bigger and smaller all at once. The Lantern Festival is still fresh in your memory, but now there's another tradition to anticipate, the Harvest Feast, when every guild, shop and household opens its doors and shares what it has. For a single evening, no one is turned away hungry. You remember last year standing at the edge of the crowd, clutching a crust of bread and hoping not to be noticed. This year, you're in the thick of it, helping Hal and Hugo haul steaming pots to the long tables set up in the square. Historians still argue whether medieval charity was real compassion, or just a way for the rich to show off. All you know is, there's nothing quite like sitting down among neighbours, masters, apprentices, beggars, merchants, and eating until your belly aches, laughing as the city's minstrels strike up a tune. You share your table with children you recognise from the alleys, their eyes wide at the piles of food. You slip an extra roll to the smallest girl, remembering winters when you'd have sold your soul for a scrap of cake. Tom leads the apprentices in a round of bawdy harvest songs, toned down of course for the master's wife's sake. You clap until your hands sting. After the feast, as the city settles into a happy sluggish quiet, Master Aldous gathers the apprentices. One by one, he presents Tom and Hal with their freedom papers. The others cheer, thump backs, even Crooktail deigns to rub against their legs. Hal, normally a joker, is solemn. "Couldn't have done it without you," he says quietly, looking at you. You feel your throat tighten and blink hard, trying not to show it. The days that follow feel strange, exciting and sad in equal measure. Tom leaves first, knapsack slung over one shoulder, Crooktail yowling in protest from the roof. He promises to write, though everyone knows letters from wandering journeymen are rare as gold. Hal stays a few more days, tying up loose ends, teaching Hugo the finer points of wheedling a second helping of stew from the kitchen. You and Hal take one last walk by the river, skipping stones and talking about everything and nothing. He says he might return one day, open a bakery, teach you to make proper bread. You promise to keep his bunk ready just in case. Before he leaves, Hal sneaks a loaf of bread into your pack carved with his initials. For luck, he says, though you suspect he just wants to make sure you never forget his terrible baking. When he's gone, the dormitory feels emptier, but not lonely. You step into new roles, helping Hugo and the younger apprentices, managing the books, even trying your hand at leading the evening stories. The master's wife asks your opinion on spice in the stew. The steward gives you the keys to the supply closet, just for the day, he claims, but you know he's testing your honesty. There's an old city legend that if an apprentice makes it to the end of harvest without breaking a tool or burning the stew, they're guaranteed a long, prosperous career. You make it through, barely. After nearly setting your sleeve alight in the forge, Hugo teases you for days. You still write to Simon, though less often. His letters come back, briefer now, full of garden news and stories of the Abbey's new orphans. He says he misses your jokes and hopes to visit the city one day. "Tell Crooktail to save a sunny spot for me," he writes. You tuck the letters away, rereading them when the days feel heavy. Sometimes, late at night, you remember Will. You wonder where he is, if he found a family, a trade, a patch of kindness in the world. You carry his knife still, and once in a while you take it out, turn it over in your hands and whisper a wish into the darkness. Historians still argue whether the pain of loss ever truly leaves or just becomes part of who you are. In the quiet hours, you know it's the latter. You're shaped by what you lost, but not defined by it. Not anymore. The seasons turn. Autumn is a slow-burning fire, copper and gold spilling through the city. The apprentices joke less now, too busy, too aware of responsibilities, and the eyes of younger boys looking up to you. You rise before dawn, light the forge, help plan the day's work. Master Aldous begins to call you by name, not just boy. The steward leaves you in charge when he runs errands. Hugo and the other new apprentices follow your lead, trusting you as you once trusted Tom and Hal. Hugo carves another wooden animal, this time a crooked fox, and leaves it on your bunk with a note. Every fox needs a den. You keep it beside your bed, a reminder that found family can be just as real as the one you lost. The city holds a parade at the very end of autumn. Lanterns shaped like fish and birds bob above the crowd. You walk with the guild, carrying a copper lantern you made yourself, feeling as proud as you ever have in your life. Children run beside you, eyes bright. You toss coins and bits of sweet bread into the crowd, watching strangers catch them with grateful hands. One night, as winter closes in again, you stand at the window of the apprentice dormitory. You watch snow begin to fall on the rooftops and feel a quiet peace settle over you. You survived, you thrived, and you helped others do the same. You're not alone, not anymore. You whisper a last thank you to the city, to the guild, to Tom and Hal, to Simon, to Will, to Crooktail, who yawns and rolls over at the foot of your bed. You make a promise, not just to remember where you came from, but to help those who come after, to share your bread, your stories, your hope. You crawl under your blanket, heart steady, the city's quiet hum outside your window, and drift into a sleep filled with dreams, not of fear or hunger, but of open doors, bright kitchens, warm forges, and laughter echoing into the morning. Winter returns quietly, not as an enemy but as an old acquaintance. Frost at the window, wood smoke curling from chimneys, the sound of boots crunching on fresh snow as the city slows and settles in. This time, you're ready. The apprentices have grown into a tight-knit crew. Hugo, once so shy and thin, is now almost as tall as you, and even the steward sometimes grumbles less and smiles more. The shop feels like a hive, humming with the warmth of shared work, meals and stories. You rise early every morning, your breath fogging in the half-dark, but it's no longer dread that greets you. It's anticipation, a sense of belonging, of routine, of purpose. You're trusted to stoke the fire, to wake the youngest apprentices, to check the ledgers for mistakes. Master Aldous says little, but when he watches you teach a new hand how to strike a rivet or polish a pan, you see a quiet pride flicker in his eyes. The world outside is still hard. On your errands you pass children with no shoes, mothers begging scraps at the market, old men sleeping under awnings, shivering and silent. You never forget where you started. You always save a crust of bread or a few coins to slip to those who need it most, remembering the sting of being overlooked, the ache of hunger, the way hope flickers in the cold. One particularly icy morning, you and Hugo find Crooktail standing on the kitchen table, tail puffed like a bottle brush, yowling at a fat mouse cornered by the bread bin. Hugo cheers. "You've finally earned your keep, old boy!" Crooktail looks deeply offended, as if catching mice is beneath him, and stalks off, tail high. For days the apprentices place tiny offerings, a sardine here, a scrap of cheese there, in the bread bin, just in case. The city celebrates midwinter by hanging lanterns from every doorway and window, chasing away the darkness with rivers of coloured light. The apprentices are in charge of keeping the guild's lanterns bright. Hugo and you take pride in making sure not a single one goes out before dawn. One evening, as the snow falls thick and fast, the master's wife calls you to the kitchen. She places a heavy loaf in your hands, still warm from the oven. "Take this to the church," she says. "The hungry will need it." She hesitates, then adds, "And take Hugo." You're good for each other. You set out together, boots crunching through drifts, lanterns swinging at your side. The city feels different at night. Soft, gentle, the chaos stilled under the hush of snow. At the church steps you find a small crowd huddled in the shadows. You break the bread, passing pieces into eager hands, watching faces brighten in the flickering light. Afterward, you and Hugo linger, gazing at the city below. "Funny," Hugo says. "I used to wish I'd end up anywhere but here. Now, I can't imagine leaving." You nod, understanding. "Me too." He looks at you, searching your face. "What do you want next?" The question surprises you. For so long your wishes were small. Survive the day, find a meal, stay warm. Now, you let yourself think bigger. Teaching, maybe even running a shop, writing stories, helping every orphan who wanders through your door. You realise that wanting is no longer something to be ashamed of. Historians still argue whether medieval orphans ever truly escaped the shadow of their pasts, whether they were haunted for life by what they'd lost. You know the ache never fully leaves. It fades, it hides, it softens. But it's also what drives you to share, to care, to lift others up. It's your compass, pointing you toward kindness. As the year turns, you and Hugo lead the apprentices through new rituals, sharing stories at night, keeping a secret stash of sweets for bad days, inventing little holidays for no reason except to make the darkness less heavy. You carve wooden tokens for each boy and girl who joins the guild, passing them on with a promise: "You're home now, for as long as you need." At the New Year's feast, Crooktail leaps onto the table and steals the master's slice of roast goose. The apprentices cheer, the master groans, and you raise your mug to the cat, hero, survivor, and official taste tester of the guild. It's said that if you hang a bit of bread and salt by the door on New Year's night, no evil will cross your threshold for a whole year. You make sure every apprentice does just that, then share a midnight laugh as you all watch Crooktail try to bat the bread down. You start writing your own stories, sometimes by candlelight, sometimes on scraps of paper tucked under your mattress. Stories of orphans who become heroes, of apprentices who change the world, of cats who never give up a sunny spot or a good meal. You don't know who will read them, maybe just Hugo and the boys, maybe someone years from now, but that's enough. On the coldest nights you remember Simon at the abbey, Will with his knife, the hundreds of nameless faces you once joined on the city streets. You hope they found warmth, that someone offered them bread and a light in the darkness. You know deep down you'd do it for any child you find, because someone did it for you. And now, as the city finally quiets, the snow a soft hush on the rooftops, you crawl into your bunk, Crooktail at your feet, and close your eyes. The city is silent, the only sound the gentle crackle of embers in the hearth, and the far-off bell marking the hour. Your eyelids grow heavy. The years blur together, hard winters, bright springs, friendships found and lost and found again. Through it all you survived. You found your way. Not because life was easy, but because, little by little, you built a home out of scraps and kindness and hope. Let your breath slow, feeling the soft weight of the blanket, the gentle warmth at your toes, the solid safety of the world you made for yourself. Let every worry and ache drift away on the soft tide of night. Remember, you are not alone. There are always open doors, bright kitchens, laughter to be shared, and gentle hands to pass the bread. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, let the city's quiet hum become your lullaby. Picture the lanterns glowing, the snow settling, the promise of another day. The pain of the past is only one thread in the tapestry. You're woven of stronger stuff, resilience, generosity, and gentle dreams. Now let yourself rest. Let the world slip away. Trust that the home you built will hold you, safe and warm, through every storm and season. Good night, dear friend. Tomorrow is waiting full of light.